you're not meant to be the right thing for everyone. You're the right thing for someone, but not for everyone. And you're the right thing sometimes, but not all the time. That doesn't mean you're not creating value. You're still absolutely creating value. We're not allowed to. Actually, if you're listening, let us know. Would you like to just have recorded, untethered conversations that happen? Just like a fly on the wall. Maybe we'll have a new show or special episode just called Fly on the Wall. It's kind of what today's feeling like.
Yeah. Man, usually before we start recording, we're just chatting about marketing and life. We're a lot more about life around marketing and business. And so, yeah, we're curious if you guys would like to hear that kind of stuff.
If you do, let us know. But so today, the topic I want to focus on is inspired by this. It's almost like a decade by decade shift. And so I heard someone, they use Elon Musk as kind of the comparison here. But so you rewind back a few decades and there were businesses and people didn't really care. Like they didn't care what the business stood for. They didn't care what the core values of the business was. They didn't care. Like when you purchased, I mean, you could even go back to like Microsoft. You purchased a computer from Microsoft. You cared if the computer was the computer. Like, did it do what it said it was going to do in terms of, did the specs meet what they said the specs were going to be? If it said it was going to have, you know, 128 megabytes of RAM, and they're like, did it have it? They're like, yes. Okay, good. So did the delivery match the marketing and sales? And it's just spec for spec. Did I get what I wanted?
Just function.
You go to get a burger and you're like, is this burger what I wanted?
Yep.
Yes, it was. Then it evolved into brand identity. So there was this, now it wasn't just, did they deliver the computer, did they deliver the burger? Now they want to know, like, what does the brand stand for? Like what almost as you start to engage with them as you would like a friend or an associate. I don't know if people mark this, but there was probably a shift into the 2000s, definitely, proliferated with the internet and the ability to interact with the business in the same kind of conversational tones and sort of, what is this, like town square that you would with friends. I think a big shift there was Facebook too, because Facebook brought this idea of pages that now you're in the same space. And originally it was very much so like clouded. Like it was murky lines between like, this is my friend and here's a post from the business. I see it in the same space. It wasn't as wasn't as defined. And still now you get the kind of blurring of lines between, kind of curated business or friend posts and organic reach there. And so that moved into now you're evaluated on your brand. Your identity as a brand, your actions as a brand. And there's still carry over here where people will judge a business on its brand, not on its product. They may care, like they might say, oh my gosh, I guess definitively Chick-fil-A sauce tastes good, but because of their position on some political issue or they're not open on Sundays and they're like, I don't like that, right? People like that was their position. It's like, oh, the product might be fine, but I don't like the brand. Take the same product, different in a different business, and I'd be all for it. And so you have this brand decision there. And then the next is sort of founder leader. So the business is overshadowed by the founder leader. And so even more so now you're like, I choose to buy stock in Starlink, not because I know anything about the financials, but because I feel like I know something about Elon Musk. And by the way, you can't actually do this, but whatever it is, right? It might be like, I buy stock in Tesla, not because I'm looking at the financials, like, old school investor would say, like, I'm just watch the numbers and look at the trends and look at your, PE ratios and whatever it is. Now it's, no, I just like that founder. I like that.
Yeah. And you're seeing this a lot with like celebrities launching their own product brands. Right. They're only able to do that. It's not like, oh, I know that The Rock is really good at making tequila. No, you just like Dwayne The Rock Johnson so you're going to support him. You have no idea if that product's better, worse, where it ranks on the scale of tequilas, but you're buying out of that affinity.
Yep. And so these all kind of, this has been the progression from business to brand to now founder leader identity. And it's super interesting to reconcile this. I'm assuming if you're listening, you are a founder leader. You are probably, you own your own business, you're leading your own business. And, like most things in small doses, it doesn't matter. But in big doses, you start to really see the consequences or the effects of whatever decision you start to make, right? It's like I eat a salad once, I I eat a salad for every meal for the rest of my life, you start to see the results. And so, and that's the compounding factor that's going on. So when we think about marketing, it's no longer, or at least we can't ignore the voice that our personal brand carries, because that's actually a heavier decision-making factor there. And so one thing that I've had to reconcile or realize is, and you've seen this in for businesses and for brands, definitely for founders, is that in silence, we assume the negative. We just do. Like, I think it's based on our just neuroprogramming and our expectations of like, we just have such a overwhelmingly negative dialogue going inside of our own brains. So if I met with silence somewhere else, in that gap, I fill it with negativity. I just like can't help but assume the worst, right? So you see someone at a store, you wave at them, maybe they saw you, maybe they didn't wave back. Like, really, you had no response. You have no data whatsoever. And your default is to fill that in and to say, oh, they don't like me, or that was weird. Why didn't they, like, you feel bad about it. And I could choose to be like, oh, they didn't see me, I should walk up and say hi. Like, that would be the default positive. That would be the response of like, oh, they just didn't see me. They probably want to see me. I should go make sure they see me, right? But usually in the gap, in the silence, we fill that with the negativity. And so we have it's just a repeated rule is the only guaranteed bad response is no response. The only guaranteed bad response is no response. You can definitely find a bad response out there, but if you want to guarantee a bad response, say nothing. Because of that fact, we fill in the silence, we fill in the gap with negativity. And so think about that as your founder brand, your founder marketing. What do you say in the silence? And I'm not saying you need to speak out about every topic or every thing there, but if you come into seasons of nothing, that's filled in with negativity. Like, people are not going to meet that gap and project positivity into it. And so, and I've seen this in people, it's really difficult as business leaders now. Is like, you might be feeling, I feel tempted. I've been tempted in this way that I actually, for the first time in my life, I want to take a hiatus from Facebook. I want to take like a gap, like a 2 weeks. We've got a trip coming up, and I just want to be super present with my family. And I know there's probably no other channel of communication that has the ability to take me away from being present with my family as much as Facebook does. For good or for bad, or for whatever it is.
Whatever it is, yeah. There are definitely the double-edged sword of connectivity, right? There's positives, but you're describing something I think that's super important, and that's, as a founder, what are the boundaries you're going to set? And in terms of how available you are, how much you share about your personal life with your business followers, and where are you choosing to take a stand? Are there issues that you're like, I'm going to be loud on this, and issues you're not going to be loud on this? So Matt, like, what are some of those things that you've had to decide, I'm going to take a stand here, or you know what, I'm going to be silent?
I think it comes down to authenticity. Like, just be true to yourself. Like, that's the best about it, as I could say. So this is interesting. Because true to myself, I'm not a natural publisher. I'm like, even my wife will reconcile, like, through the day, I just like live in the moment. And she's like, how was today? And I can't even help it. I go from thing to thing to thing to thing. Like, I just pack so much into my days that if she was like, how was today? I'm like, it felt good. Like, I could tell you how I feel about my day way more than I could tell you what actually happened in the count to count, because I'll honestly forget. I'm like, I'm here, I'm present, we're doing it. And then I move on to the next thing. And it has left my mind. Like, I could not be as effective or productive as I am if I actually carried the weight of the thing before or the weight of the thing coming up. And so I've actually done, I subconsciously or consciously, whatever it is, I kind of forget. I just constantly move on. And so, so think about that. And I'm not naturally documenting the thing. I'm not telling them, oh, here, I'm having this thing. This is great. I never was inclined to take a picture of my food. I was never inclined to like any of that thing, like think to record it. And so those are, learned, trained behavior. I have to say, like, do I want to do that thing? And like, do I find ways to do that? And so, but you still want to be authentic, right? So you're asking, like, what are the things you're silent on? What are the things that you're loud about? I think for me, I actually haven't really broached many like heavy to tread on topic.
Yeah. And I don't know if I even mean like necessarily big social political things, because that wouldn't be authentic for you to all of a sudden get loud on that. Like, if that's who you've been forever, it would be expected. What about even just in how you balance personal life and business life?
Here's what I've started to do. And so this is an example. It's not as public, but it is behind, or it's like in conversation. So the biggest thing that I get impacted with is I get a lot of DMs. I actually just saw, I think Russell made a post about this, as he was like, actually, I should listen to the whole post. I saw it briefly and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Sorry, Russell, didn't catch me all the way, but he was saying like, anybody who's got into a business, you get hundreds of these DMs. And it's like, how do you manage that? Because realistically, it's not even well organized. Like I wish someone's going to tell me there's some tool out here, but like to organize your inbox, it's not organized. They sort it randomly things. You could be in a group chat and like a million group things. So there are things that I'm like, I wish I saw less of, and it comes always to the surface. It's also like, we're a 24/7 company. So people, I guess, assume that I'm up 24/7. But so it's like, if you DM me, like here's like a secret. If you DM me at 2 a.m., there's going to be like 20 people in front of you by like 9 a.m. when I look. And I'm not the kind of person who's like ever been zero inbox for Facebook. I've just never felt the need to, probably because of those kind of like group, or kind of, I used to call them like fam spam, where you have the like group and like they're just throwing you into it. And so there was so many that I was like, I know that's not important. It kind of conditioned me to think like, well, if everything's not important, then I'm just not going to look at it. But so that's a difficulty, because that's silence in that gap. I have not created a system to prioritize always responding to everybody, good or bad.
Nor have you ever set the expectation, if you send me a message on Facebook, I will reply in X amount of time.
No, and that's where, yeah. So here's an example. So I'm challenged with this, but so here's what I do is it's usually, ironically, if you start messaging me like every hour on the hour, I'm going to see it, because you're going to hit me in the moment where I see it. But like a lot of times throughout the day, there's big gaps. It's like, I'll look at the like messages thing probably 3 to 4 times a day. And so it's like, if you're in the top 10 in the time when I'm looking at it, like, congrats, you got in. If you were below that, like you just, unless
like calling into a radio show, man.
It kind of is. But when I get those folks that are having a hard time, I will just say, this is what I'll say. It's like, hey, I apologize. So I'll loop them into my observation. I apologize for not being able to effectively prioritize this. I want to let you into something. In the silence here, I see that you assumed negativity. I just want to let you know, I don't think anything lower of this. This is not a reflection of how I feel as a person. So I just bring people into that conversation now, because I just prefer. It's almost freeing to me to like to address it. Because otherwise, I feel guilty. I am faced with that guilt, and so by just looping folks into this situation of what's being perceived there, and almost cleaning it up on their behalf of, hey, I see what's going on here. I totally get that no response feels like a bad response. But there was no negativity on my side. Like, I really value this message. I appreciate you sending it. And here's my thoughts and inputs here, or whatever it might be. And so, because that's what I was getting back to, what I almost wish was possible. You can't put like a autoresponder on Facebook. I would love that. Like I could do with email, because it would be like, hey, you caught me between, like, I would autorespond and be like, I check all of my messages at, whatever it is, X time and X time. And honestly, if you're not in the top 10 at that moment, there's a chance that you might get missed. I would tell people, I would autorespond and be like, if this is really important, send me an email. And my assistant is great at making sure, like, taking care of all this stuff. And so, that's where it's like, I try to drive to the channels where I know there's anti-fragile systems in place there, where it's not reliant on me. There's also a greater chance for anything. And that's where most of the time the conversation happens there, because it's good. It's a place where we interface, and there's community and the socialness of social media. But I usually drive folks back to my email, because I just know I don't want the ball to be dropped. And I know I could take 250 inbound emails tomorrow, and Tiffany would do a fabulous job of like responding to the ones she already knows the response to, filtering out, qualifying, and then in her, she would, elevate the things to me that need my attention.
So it's interesting that on Facebook, you found a way to alleviate that pressure that builds by just addressing it, right? By calling it out. Hey, I'm addressing the negativity, helps for you of the guilt. Where else in business do you feel that kind of pressure as the founder? And how are you dealing with it in other ways, other places?
If you think about the age-old era of business, there are levels of value in the marketplace, and it needs to exist, right? It's like, sometimes I really appreciate that fast food exists. I'm starving, I'm driving, I need something like, or it's like it's late night and I just want a coffee and there's a drive-through coffee at McDonald's, I can get it. Do I think that's the best coffee in the world? No. But in that moment, I really appreciate it, right? This is like the challenge. If you find yourself in a business space where it's like you're not meant to be the right thing for everyone. Like you're the right thing for someone, but not for everyone. And you're the right thing sometimes, but not all the time. That doesn't mean you're not creating value. You're still absolutely creating value. However, it can feel, when you start to have an elevated like personal brand, it can feel so judgmental because you feel like you're reflective as a person. And like, so think about that. It's like there's areas in your life where I guess just difficult to reconcile that you're like, at the end of my life, if someone said, hey, you weren't the best business leader, I'd be like, that's a bummer. But if they said, but you were an incredible father and husband, I'd be like, winning. Actually, I get it. I can't be all things to all people. And you want to put your best foot out there. And that's the weird thing is when it starts, you're like, I want to put good into the world. And you just realize it's not that easy. Like I think about like Elon Musk is a great, phenomenal entrepreneur. Just had their whole line recalled because of a critical error. And that probably reflects on him. It feels so embarrassing. So like, how could this happen? You know, shareholders are like, I mean, I'm a Tesla stockholder. You're like, this is brutal. Like we're like, it's not feeling like a great season the last couple of years, right? For people who are holding Tesla stock. And I'm sure there's folks who are saying like, gosh, Elon, how could you let this happen? Like that's what they're saying. Elon, how could you actually ship a truck where the acceleration pedal like gets stuck and also it chops off fingers if you close the frunk? Like, how could you let that happen? And you know what Elon's thinking? He's like, I pay people $200,000-$300,000 a year. Like, I'm not trying to cheaply solve the problem here. No one has the impression of like, oh, well, the quality check guys at Tesla, they make, $20 an hour. That's not the case. Like if you can get a job that like they are trying to perform at the highest possible level of doing this. It's just, it's an innovator's dilemma. It's like when you like it's, how do you spot the pioneers like face down in the mud with arrows in their back? It's like, oh, they're like, they charted the path and they took all the beating to get there. And so it's like, here he is charting the path, taking the beating. But in that moment, man, it's like, that's painful. It's painful as a leader because you think like for Elon, he could have just taken all his money and be like, I'm done innovating. I'm just going to sell all my shares over here. It's a public company. Like I'll be on a beach somewhere. Like he's not doing it to feed his family. He really does believe in a bigger thing there. And so that's where you have to take a bigger vision. So for me, that bigger vision, at least for the current businesses that I have, there's small things that stack in like creating a positive day. But for me, it still comes down to like teaching my kids what hard work looks like, what like contributing and building value in the world is, because I realize like I think about this all the time. My wife is more medically inclined. She's a dietitian. She could have been a phenomenal doctor. Like she was a valedictorian, everything, did master's program, everything straight A's. That's just, she's inclined in that way. I'm not. And I think like maybe like I have no idea the impact our kids will have. Cause I'm like, they get to see me fail forward, take imperfect action and be disciplined in that. And they get my wife being like, hey, let's be disciplined and excellent. Like, and if you pair those two things together, that is a dangerous combo. And so like, I personally believe that like the impact on the world is going to be greater in my kids than me, but because I get it. Like I'm not I'm not like the Elon Musk genius. Like there are certain things unique or like, oh my gosh, he has that skill there. I'm like, I am an imperfect action taker. Like that is what I do. I will consume and act. And in that process of being bad fast, try to gain the reps there. And, but so that's where I feel that's my role is like, man, I'm doing this. So these kids are fully equipped to solve some incredibly big, meaningful problems. And I don't know what that looks like. There are, I say my world is not life and death. They might be solving life and death problems. And so that's where, that's what helps to remind me, like, why do you keep going? Like, why do you take the lashings when it doesn't go as you planned or your best efforts just fell up short? Like that's the hardest feeling about it is, and that's probably what like killing Elon is. He's like, he didn't phone it in. I don't believe that he phoned it in. Even like you get to a certain level, like you hire great talent who recruits great talent, who recruits great talent. Like I don't believe that Tesla hasn't tried for top of market execution and all of these things. They just wouldn't survive or wouldn't even, have any potential there. And so that's, how do I reconcile when you're like, I disappointed a customer is I'm like, I am teaching my kids how to persevere in disappointment.
I like that mindset, that perspective on it, where like there's always going to be disgruntled customers. There's always going to be failures in business. And shifting that to I'm using this to educate and model for my kids, like how to address and resolve. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. And I've said the skill that I want to give to them is how to reconcile relationships. And so think about that. Think like this is like you pray for patience, and like so God gives you like scenarios where it's like, this is gonna be so trying. You're like, darn it, what do I want here? And so it's like the vision was I want to model how to be excellent at reconciling relationships. Like, what does that mean? First, I'm gonna ruin the relationship, and then I'm just gonna get great at overcoming the failure, because for how I'm programmed and how I approach the world is I just believe that like you are bad and then less bad and then maybe get some way decent. And so I have not let the fear of being bad stop me from doing, because I know what I'll get great at is coming back after. It's like, hey, I was bad. This was disappointing. I absolutely let you down. How can I reconcile this relationship? And so, it's just been a funny thing in that space is you're like, oh man, what did I set out to do here? But so these are the things where if you're a founder, you got to be conscious of it, especially in your marketing, your messaging. And this is the gift of a problem that you'll face if you solve those other problems. Like if you start to have impact, you start to serve people, deliver solutions, gain traction, get good at marketing. Congratulations. Now you get to deal with like the absolute mind mess that is growing with the same kind of like relational crazy stress and dynamic that you get in like a home or friend relationship, but now it's extended, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, whatever it is in terms of the impact there. It's like it still comes down to people, and that's so difficult to do because we don't actually have capacity to have that many meaningful relationships. Taylor Swift, I was just reading a thing today, like how loyal her fan base is. What's the key thing there? Like they feel like they have spent time with her, an inordinate amount of time. Like they feel like Taylor's been there with them in all of these meaningful events. You have all these people that treat her like Taylor's their bestie, right? They got Swifties. And like, how did she do that? And like, come back to like, in effect, it was marketing. And she had a product that effectively is its own marketing, right? It's like you're creating songs, and then when people play the songs, they learn about the songs, then they want to play the songs more. And so, but for founders, you like think about it in that way. Like you're tempted to be silent, and what is Taylor? A prolific publisher. And the more you publish, the more your voice is out there. And Taylor's not defined by how many people don't like her, right? It's about all the people that do, and that still might. I mean, for all we know, it's the minority. But you can have a amassed minority that has significant impact.
Agreed. I think it's great. Let us know after you watch or listen to this show. Let us know, if you want to hear more of just kind of Matt and I just chatting through the back end of marketing and business and those types of things. I think that's really fascinating. Thanks for sharing all the kind of the founders' dilemmas and some of the challenges that founders are facing.